What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts Jon Macaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. Now, on to the show.
All right, there we are. Hey, I'm going to start this off with a quote from the book written by our guest today. Nutrition and psychiatry may not seem like the most natural fit. When you picture Dr. Freud with his pipe and his leather couch, he's probably not scribbling a recipe for baked salmon on his prescription pad. Indeed, in my experience, psychiatrists sent their patients home with prescription drugs or referrals to other types of therapy, but no guidance on how food can help them with the challenges that brought them to the analyst's couch. And though many conscientious modern eaters think constantly about the food we're eating, how it will affect our hearts, the environment, and most of all, our waistlines, we don't think about how it influences our brains. Here we go. Episode 4 of season 4 of Men Talking Mindfulness, already ankle deep into February 2022. I'm Jon Macaskill over here in Colorado Springs with my brother from another mother, Will Schneider in New York City. And we are your hosts of Men Talking Mindfulness. So glad you're joining us today, either live on video or watching or listening to the show later. Either way, we're so excited to have you joining us, and we're excited to get into the show today. This is Your Brain on Food with author and nutritional psychiatrist, Dr. Naidoo. There's the book Will's holding up. Essentially, we'll be getting into talking about mindful meals or mindful eating. That's one of the things that Will and I talk about often on the show, but we're going to get into much more detail with Dr. Naidoo. And I won't waste any more of your time. I'm going to turn it over to Will to introduce our amazing guest, and we'll get on to the show. Let me bring up Dr. Naidoo. There she is.
There she is. Hey, Dr. Naidoo, great to have you here. Just a little bio on. So glad to have you here. A little bio on our guest today. Dr. Naidoo is a faculty member at Harvard Medical School, a professional chef, which I really enjoyed learning about, culinary instructor, and nutrition specialist. She is the first national psychiatrist recognized by the American Psychiatric Association, and is the author of This Is Your Brain on Food, an indispensable guide to the surprising foods that fight depression, PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, OCD, and more. And we are so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Naidoo. I'm excited to get into this discussion.
Thank you both for this invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. This is, we're really stoked. What we like to do, Dr. Naidoo, to start as a means of continually creating the opportunity for our audience to practice is we're going to do a simple grounding practice. We've done this one before. It's actually brought to us by another guest we had on the show, or from Breath. We're going to do a simple, coherent breathing practice where we're just going to inhale for 5 seconds very slowly, exhaling for 5 seconds. We're going to do it for 5 times. Also, Dr. Naidoo, as you can probably tell, and John, kind of jacked up for the show. So this helps us to literally, it's probably selfish on the behalf of Men Talking Mindfulness, help ground us down a little bit so we can focus and really dive into this wonderful book that we're going to talk about today. So here we are. So there's, great. So everyone, ground yourself with your feet on the floor if you can, your hands, if you're sitting, maybe on your lap or maybe interlaced on the table in front of you. Close the eyes if that's safe for you, or if you're just driving or walking your dog or mowing your lawn, you can do this while you're doing those things as well. So maybe roll your head a little bit side to side, relax your shoulders, and let's start with a nice little exhale out the mouth, out the throat. Good. And into the nose for 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Big inhale, 3, 2, 1. And exhaling very slowly from beginning for 5, 4. Let it eke out slowly. 2, 1. Keep going. Control the breath. Inhaling big for 5, 4, 3, 2. Exhaling easy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll keep going slowly in 5. Trying to drop that breath deep into your pelvis and filling to the top of the chest, and exhaling, letting it go for 5 seconds again. 4, 3. Really control that breath. We got a couple more rounds. Inhale. 5. Slowly exhaling. 5. Good. One more in for 5. Exhale. 5. So I'm just back to normal breath. Just notice how you're feeling. Just after that, that's like 1 minute of breathing. That's it. And this is available, and this simple 5-5 breath, coherent breathing pattern and technique is available anytime. You just need to feel more focused, more grounded, and more present in the moment. When you're ready, open your eyes, and let's start the show, everybody. So fantastic. Thank you again, Dr. Naidoo, for being here. Jon and I, we dove through the book, really went in there. I have like notes and underlining all sorts of wonderful things in your book. So why don't you give us a little more background about yourself, like you being the first nutritional psychiatrist, right? How you got there, why, and whatever else you want to add to that.
Well, Jon and Will, thank you so much for hosting me, for this invitation, and thank you both for your service. Deeply appreciate that as well. So thank you. And, to share a little bit on my book, I think it stems from my childhood. I grew up with my grandparents during the day because my mom was in medical school, and I just absorbed natural, healthy eating habits from my grandparents. My grandmother would cook from scratch. I'd help her pick fresh vegetables from the garden. We'd eat meals together. My grandparents taught me yoga and meditation. So it kind of came with me into the world. And there was also a lot of doctor talk at the dinner table and lunch table because a lot of my uncles and aunts were either a couple of Ayurvedic practitioners and also doctors. So it came with this into the world. And when I started to treat mental health patients, I kept wondering, we're learning about how these medications have such a devastating impact on things like the metabolic panel. So they are effective and they've saved the lives of many of my patients, but they also have side effects. So why are we not asking about diet and exercise? What are you eating? What else are we doing? Do you have a mindfulness practice? And I think that that gap really was very apparent to me. And very early on, it became more apparent when a patient kind of, was a very young resident, very junior and new, and kind of yelled at me, telling me I'd caused him to gain weight because he read on the Prozac label that, that's one of the side effects. But I knew from the data in front of me that wasn't the case. But he was also drinking this very, very large cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which is a favorite in Boston. And being a timid resident, I sort of said, let's call him Bill. And I said, so, what did you put in your coffee today? I knew that the question was important. I may not have known why at the time, because I sort of was thinking to myself, he's talking about his weight, but he's not really looking at what he's doing. And when I asked the question, he told me, and we calculated it. We sat down and we calculated it online. I'm not much of a calorie counter, but this made sense in terms of translating the information. He was using a quarter cup or more of processed creamer, and then about 8 teaspoons of sugar, and having it every single day, sometimes one and another half of those. And he realized in that moment, it was a very big, it was like a light bulb went off for him. And it was my aha moment because I could see him compute that, wow, this is something I can change. I'm consuming all of these calories. I'm not even eating something and just drinking this coffee. So that really led me to want to explore more about nutrition, study it, and put that into my evaluations with patients, and it grew from there. My tryptocalorie score was really related to Julia Child, understanding that was later on in her life that she went. And I thought, why not me? And putting it together came with an opportunity to start my own small clinical service and bring these areas together. And that's a long story, but that's kind of how it came together.
Wow.
Well, that's fantastic, Dr. Naidoo, and very thankful that you've made this journey and that you've written this book that I know is going to help so many people and is already helping so many people with the work that you do. I want to talk about the mind-gut connection and the microbiome. Can you walk us through what the microbiome is and then why the gut-mind connection is so important?
Great. So let's start with a simple thing. If you have a headache, you might take a Tylenol, you might take a Motrin, you swallow it, you drink some water. What happens? Maybe 10 minutes, a half hour, headache goes away. But think about that for a second. You're swallowing it, it's going to your digestive tract, to your gut, but it's impacting largely the headache, which is, located in your brain. So when we think about it, the neuroscience of the gut microbiome and the connections, and we'll unpack this together, is neuroscience over the last couple of decades. Although Hippocrates spoke to it eons ago, the science had to follow, the research had to follow. But that gut-brain connection actually unfolds the food-mood connection, because the gut and brain are separate parts of the body, but they arise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. They divide up apart and they're different locations. Then they're connected by the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve. And that acts like a chemical messaging system, like a two-way superhighway, allowing for messages to be transmitted all the time, up and down. So if you think about that and then realize that 90% or more of the serotonin receptors and serotonin itself made in the gut, interacting with those microbes, you start to realize and put the pictures together around a few things. If someone has ever taken a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI like Prozac or Zoloft, they often experience gastrointestinal discomfort. And now we understand why. Another important thing in these times to understand, because the gut is so powerful, is that 70% of the immune system is there. How you eat is affecting your immunity as well. So putting these different pieces together, you start to understand that the connection is there. Just like that pill you took for a headache and that's being broken down in the gut, so is the food. And when the food reaches the gut, you have 39 odd trillion bacteria that live there, but there are 5 different types, not just bacteria, 5 types, but the bacteria are the most studied. And on a day that you're eating the healthier meal, the good microbes thrive. They're being fed fiber from veggies and fruit and beans, nuts, seeds, and legumes, and they thrive and they do well and they can do their job. On a day that you're going to the fast food lane and you're having the milkshakes and French fries and kind of the more fast food, the bad microbes thrive because they love all those ingredients that we've usually thought are only related to our waistlines, but those foods are also affecting our brain and our mind. When those bad microbes thrive, they start to set up the gut for inflammation and imbalance, and they start to damage the breakdown products of those foods, start to damage the single cell gut lining, which is very delicate. And over time, it gets to form conditions like leaky gut. And that inflammation is very, very much a factor that has been researched to underlie conditions like depression, anxiety, cognitive disorders, and more. So inflammation is really now a part of the newer thinking in how these conditions arise. That's a long explanation, but an unpacking of where the science is at with trying to understand that gut-brain connection.
And one of the thank you for that. One of the major contributors, and you come back to this again in a book, is the Western diet and also the Mediterranean eating pattern. So, and I like the way you describe it. It's like, hey, if I'm eating good foods, right, I begin to feel good. If I'm eating, bad foods, which, we'll talk about, that the Western diet is just not a good diet at all. I mean, so what is the Western diet? Why is it so destructive to our minds and our bodies? And then we'll kind of jump into, the health, life and health affirming effects of the Mediterranean eating pattern that you discuss throughout the book and mention as a cure or a way of keeping clear, staying healthy, and in less inflammation as well.
That's a great question, because The Western diet is also called the Standard American Diet, and the acronym is SAD for a good reason. It is sort of sad.
It is sad. It makes us sad,
as an
doesn't
American, I say that it is sad. But here's the thing, you can't fight the food industrialization and the industrialization process, which really changed the nature of food and sort of moved us from wholesome whole foods to really learning convenience food, microwave dinners, frozen foods, packaged processed foods, things like that. So the things that we have been thinking all this time are bad for our waistline or bad for type 2 diabetes, or your doctor might say you need to eat differently for hypertension, actually also impact the brain. So processed, ultra processed junk foods and fast foods, you may or may not be surprised to know that fast food French fries contain sugar. They contain added sugar. You don't taste the sugar, but the research and development taught food companies that that makes them super delicious and makes them hyper palatable. But what does that mean? When I go to the drive-through, I upsize, and when I upsize, I eat the whole bag. So the craving set in, and I want that whole bag of French fries. So that's the reason they add sugar to it. They make it more delicious that way. So there's that category: artificial sweeteners, processed vegetable oils, the trans fats. Fortunately, there's less of them in our foods now, but you do have to be on the lookout for them. And the things that we have known for a while are not the healthiest, but they also actually impact the brain.
Well, go a little further. So how does that affect? I mean, 'cause, what I really enjoyed about your book, Dr. Naidoo, is like, it's not just our health, like in our and our immune system and our body, but it's like, again, it's the belly, right, and the mind. So how does the Western diet affect our cognition and our memory?
Sure. So going back to those gut microbes, right? So you're eating that fast food meal, or eating a meal that's laden with artificial and refined sugars. The food is being digested. The microbes interact with what's in your food compared to if you're eating, say, a leafy green salad with colors of the rainbows of veggies, healthy proteins, healthy fats. Those microbes are fed, that they thrive, and they do good for your body. Those microbes involved in multiple functions: vitamin production, hormones, immunity, mental health, sleep and circadian rhythm, so your internal body clock. So many functions, many more than that. So they're busy working. And when they fed, they work well. But when we're feeding them with kind of junk foods, the bad microbes thrive, and their breakdown products of the food are more toxic to the cell line, the single cell lining in the gut, but more toxic to the body and set us up for inflammation. So you get these toxic products in the gut, you get the setup for what is over time inflammation. And that inflammation in the gut is because the gut and brain are connected, starts to develop neuroinflammation or impact on the brain. Some of the mechanisms are oxidative stress and inflammation, neuroinflammation. These are important because then, clinically, what I would see is either some new onset of symptoms or an uptick of symptoms, such as a client I had who, was doing well in treatment, but, had changed her job. She got a great promotion before COVID. And the promotion led to a very big change in lifestyle. And she was on the road and flying in airports and traveling almost 4 or 5 days of the week, compared to eating at home, taking lunch to work, walking her dog, doing her yoga classes, exercising regularly, having maybe a glass of wine a week. It all flipped on itself because of networking, eating out of the bar fridge, arriving late, eating in the airport. And really over 18 months, she developed significant dysbiosis or imbalance in the gut. And another way to think about that is inflammation in the gut. And she had a significant uptick of Hang-xiety, which corrected over time with gut healing that we did through adjusting her diet. And so that sort of helps you understand. Now, I think it's important for us to understand the connection. Inflammation is not a word that's always understood. If you fall and scuff your knee or you get a scrape, Inflammation is a helpful process in the body that helps us heal. But we're talking about a chronic, low-grade, insidious inflammation that gets set up through how we're eating and impacts the gut.
Yeah, it's like it's interesting that a change in lifestyle, like whether it's a job or whether it's something new introduced in your life that can actually raise stress levels, raise anxiety levels, and then we kind of shift into these comfort foods, because they make us feel good in the very short term, but as you mentioned, over a few weeks, a couple months, it really throws the balance off. In this microbiome, it has a dramatic effect in our cognition and how we're feeling about ourselves and the world. So really, like, I say this because I just want people to be aware out there that just because life changes, doesn't mean that we need to throw our health and on our mindfulness of health like under the bus. Like, how, I guess it's like in those situations, like, what do you do in order to continually maintain a healthy lifestyle? So yeah.
On that note, the thing I should also mention more, which is really important for us to know, is that all conditions right now are being seen as having diet as the underpinning of the one thing we can change. Conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and now mental health. If we start to eat differently, this is a lifestyle change which can truly impact ourselves. So and I think to myself, we eat several meals a day. So why not do it a little bit better? And why not be in control of it?
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Dr. Naidoo, in your book, you mentioned obviously that a lot of challenges and disorders can be helped by cutting out or adding certain foods, which is a lot of what we've discussed already. And since we only have an hour, we'll kind of focus on the anxiety, stress, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. But for our audience, I want you all to know that Dr. Naidoo goes into much more detail on OCD, bipolar disorder, insomnia, and fatigue, and much, much more. But that said, again, let's talk about the anxiety. What foods should we specifically avoid or add in to keep our anxiety levels low?
That's a great question. With anxiety, one of the most overlooked foods that people are including all the time, besides the standard American diet that we talked about, are things like artificial sweeteners. This is a big one in this category because people sometimes don't realize when they're having, say, a calming tea, if they're adding aspartame or saccharin or sucralose or even stevia has been shown in these particular studies, they can actually drive anxiety, unfortunately. And that's something often people are not realizing it. Maybe they're trying to come off sugar, they're going towards a diet soda. Other offending agents, but this is all about moderation and something I call body intelligence, are caffeine and alcohol. Alcohol always in moderation, and caffeine, studies have shown drinking and consuming less than 400 milligrams a day is okay for most people. Caffeine on its own is actually an okay substance. I think there are two issues with caffeine. One, what we add to our coffee, like my client Bill, these 8 teaspoons of sugar. And the other with coffee is having too much of it and not realizing that we cannot tolerate more than a certain amount. And if it makes you jittery and uncomfortable, then it's not for you. So those are some of the ones to really, really keep an eye out for, as well as in some studies, consuming gluten was associated with more anxiety. So it's not something I ask people to exclude unless they have. We're not able to correct some of their symptoms through other dietary changes. And I usually help them find more wholesome sources of gluten than, say, processed sliced bread from the supermarket that is very shelf stable and has a lot of preservatives in them.
Well, just to be clear on your caffeine consumption you talk about in the book, and I like the way you break it down. I just want our audience to be very clear on this. So a venti from Starbucks is over the limit. It's like 470 milligrams of caffeine. So one of those, like, you're already over the limit, right? And you say, like, in the book, like, no caffeine past 3 o'clock because of how it affects our sleep. I think that's right. Yeah. And also, so that would be maybe maybe 4 cups of coffee before 3 o'clock is the max. So just so people are clear,
Right.
about the caffeine consumption that's out there.
Right. And here's the thing, because of the uniqueness of the gut microbiome, it's like kind of like a thumbprint for every one of us. People are different. Some people drink a ton of coffee and they're fine. But some people have half a cup and their heart is racing, they're feeling jittery. So it really is paying attention to that body temperature. I like the guideline that you gave, because caffeine definitely impacts your sleep. Some people actually don't drink a cup of coffee past 1 o'clock. I'm one of those people, because I find I love coffee, but if I'm having it late in the day, I can be up at night. So it's something I learned from my own body and realized that it's something I need to do differently. Some people can tolerate more and it doesn't affect their sleep, but this is a guidance that, if you're getting those large cups of coffee, firstly, be careful what you're putting in them. And secondly, realize how much of caffeine you're consuming.
And actually, let's clear alcohol up as well. I think you mentioned alcohol so much in the book about it's part of, which was interesting, is part of the Mediterranean eating pattern, like 2 glasses of wine max. You say that for moderate drinking, I want to get really clear what moderate drinking is. You say it's like no more than 14 drinks a week for men, 7 for women, tops or less. And then it's but it's like 2 beers. A beer is like 7 to 12, 10% alcohol. Wine is like 14. And then if I'm drinking bourbon, it's like 40%. So it's 40, like, I don't want to be doing like, pounding 14 bourbons a week. Do I? Is that different?
No, I think that's a really great question. And one that I actually want to clarify, because, the guidelines, the book was written a few years, when you publish a book, it's written about the year before. And I would say that a lot of updated guidances are probably much more conservative. And also, I feel that, so I like the fact that you're asking that question, because here's the thing with alcohol. It may not be for you. This is, the pandemic has shown us that drug and alcohol use has risen tremendously. The confinement and quarantine of the pandemic, the loneliness, isolation, and other problems have really escalated substance abuse. So I want to be especially mindful about this. So I love the fact that you asked that question. And here's my answer to your guidance around it. If you're not someone who drinks a lot of wine or alcohol, continue as you are doing. No one says because it's in the so-called diet that you have to now consume the wine. Just continue on your path, because that's good for you. Alcohol in moderation is great, and I think the guidances are much lower than I had originally stated, because the guidances have changed. So I would say, a red wine with resveratrol, which is a antioxidant, good idea. Once you have to have 2 glasses every night? No. Do some people do that? Yes, and maybe they're perfectly fine. The other thing is helping our community and helping one another. If you're noticing a friend who perhaps has struggled during the pandemic and is consuming a little bit more, like that patient who began traveling so much and was under pressure in her networking meetings, then realize that you can offer help, you can guide people towards resources for this type of thing, because it's a big issue right now.
And how does alcohol contribute to anxiety? I know you mentioned, if some people will, drink alcohol at night so they go to sleep, which they don't get into the deeper sleep and also the REM patterns. But then the next morning, you mentioned like they could be have anxiety because I don't know if their body's going through withdrawal or what, but like how does that affect, like, okay, so I slept off my alcohol, probably didn't sleep as deep as I wanted to because of the alcohol, and then the next day I'm already stressed and I just woke up.
Correct. So there's a couple of mechanisms. So one mechanism is if you're leaning on that glass of wine or maybe a drink or two to put you to sleep, it's ultimately going to completely disrupt your sleep architecture, which is what you're referring to. And that's not what you want to be. We should not be using alcohol as a crutch to get us to sleep. You should be speaking to your doctor about problems with sleep. But the problem with how much you drink and what you're able to tolerate is people wake up with Hang-xiety, which is that feeling of angst. Maybe they've had a few many drinks the night before, their heart is racing. In clinical terms, it's sort of mild withdrawal from alcohol, right? You've drank a whole lot the day before and your body is responding because it's not getting alcohol at 7 a.m. So that type of you get what we've called hang-xiety, or it's just anxiety from waking up, having underlying anxiety, that being now precipitated. A couple of things with that: you could be mildly dehydrated if you're not drinking a ton of water as you're consuming whichever form of alcohol. You could be dehydrated, which would lead to anxiety as well. So there are these different mechanisms to be careful of, and that's why I go back to drink in moderation, not every day. Just because a guidance says that, or prior guidance or current, do what makes you feel best, and that's again body intelligence. Be led by that.
Yeah, I think that's when mindfulness and meditation and the practices of mindfulness help us to tap into that intuition, and it's really created a tremendous amount of health in my life. Like I didn't, when I started practicing, before I started practicing yoga, I ate pretty good. I probably drank a little too much, maybe ate a little bit too much red meat or this or that, and not enough like vegetables and grains. And then naturally through the yoga practice and through meditation, I just started wanting to eat healthier and wanting to maintain, I guess, that physical vibrancy as well as the mental clarity that these practices brought me. And so I just think that another toot for mindfulness and meditation, Jon, to help us just like kind of understand and kind of get in. I feel so much of us, because of how we're continually hijacked digitally, and we're always being pulled in a million directions because of the messaging that's out there and the marketing and the communication and the news, that we lose touch with our body. And yoga and meditation, or just even getting to the gym, is going to help us tap into this inherent brilliance that's on the inside if we just get quiet and listen. And I think you might have a better opportunity of taking on a healthier lifestyle by just sitting and being mindful a little bit every day, or doing some mindful movement.
I would like to say something about that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Jon. I think that this is where we go wrong with anxiety. People will say to me, what should I do when I'm anxious? And of course, most doctors pull out a prescription pad and out comes the Klonopin or the Xanax or the SSRI, whichever the medication is. But the reality is that could be needed in certain situations. And it is, like I said, it has saved many of my patients with a severity of illness where they need it. But that's not the moment that you need that you need to be looking for the solution. If you have anxiety, on the days or the times when you are less anxious, practicing learning mindfulness, practicing the breathing exercise you did, finding other ways to calm your body, to look internally, are so key. Because then when you wake up in the morning and you have panic or you have that anxiety, your tools are already in your toolkit. It's not necessarily a pill. It can also be, let me get up and ground myself. Let me, do some yoga, do a sun salutation, do some meditation, find a way to calm down my body. I think that's critical in what you said, Will, because very often, we doctors are acting reactively by pulling out that prescription pad, and we as consumers as a group, should be acting proactively, so we know how to manage ourselves. And then if you still need that medication, absolutely, if doctors prescribed it, it's there for you to help you, but also practice the other things.
Absolutely. And I love how in the book you talk about, once you'd been diagnosed with cancer, which we didn't discuss in the bio, but once you'd been diagnosed with cancer, you started practicing these more regularly. You had practiced them, but you started upping it, and how much those helped to calm your body and your mind, in addition to your changing of your diet. You said that no one thing here changed everything, but that mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and eating well, exercising, all together came together to really change things for you as you went through your treatment. So that was very powerful to share that. I do want to talk about we mentioned briefly the sugars and artificial sweeteners and how they contribute to anxiety, but I was also blown away by the correlation of the sugar and artificial sweeteners to depression, almost a perfect correlation. Almost of a 1.0. Can you talk about that and why what's happening there, and then what's the limit, if you will, of what we should be taking in for sugar?
there are sugar natural foods. So sugar is naturally in our food, and the natural sources are fine. So a piece of fruit, my berries are my favorite because they're lower glycemic. That's part of the diet, and sugar is also in other natural foods. We're talking about the artificial sweeteners, and we're talking about the added and refined sugars, right? So when you look at a food label, now companies have to actually tell you the amount of added sugar they put in. That really gives you the sugar load that's going on. These are disruptive to those gut microbes. They disrupt the gut microbiome and the environment. They feed the wrong bugs, the wrong bacteria down there, which then start to thrive. They basically upset the balance. And one of the things that people don't realize is, I'm not saying never ever have an artificial sweetener. I'm saying be mindful, have less of it if you do consume it. If you have moved from soda to diet soda and you're trying to come off soda, maybe cut back a little bit on the diet soda and really be moving in the direction of water, because it's all a path. This is not a quick fix. It's not an overnight plan. Nutritional psychiatry is not, let's feel better for the award show or a wedding. It's let's change our lifestyle, right? Because
so you're always ready for the award show, right? You're always ready. I'm sorry.
This is what the media, this is what we see in the media. But the reality is, when you are mindful in eating in a mindful way and making mindful choices, a lot of my clients will actually lose weight because they're not only eating healthier, they're practicing this in a very holistic way. And I think that paying attention to that becomes important. But when we go back to these mechanisms, essentially a lot of these foods disrupt that microbiome. And they, once that is affected over time, it's very hard. It's not impossible, and dietary changes can reverse the gut inflammation. But it's hard for people in that moment to realize what's going on because everything is out of whack, so to speak. And another one that people don't realize that I uncovered in my research was nitrates in processed meats and sort of processed foods. Those are used as an additive, often, as a preservative, and they're nitrates in natural foods as well. But we're talking about the processing, and something about that was shown in studies to worsen depression. So these are things which, we might be consuming a lunch meat sandwich every day and not realize that, we may be worsening our mood just because we're taking in that amount of consistent nitrates from those processed meats.
I got to admit, Dr. Naidoo, that one upset me a little bit because I love salami, and you specifically called out salami in the book. I was like, oh no.
Believe it or not, John, you will go to supermarkets now and you will see nitrate-free salami. I have seen it.
Perfect.
You actually have them labeled,
and
people, they found this. So some supermarkets actually have that. So you're in luck.
Nice.
Two of the big culprits here about, and we're going to move on. I think it'd be good, John, to get into like mental cognition and clarity as far as for time's sake. Is like, well, aspartame you talk about, just like, wow, evil. That's Diet Coke, right? And then also, high fructose corn syrup, which is in a lot of our foods, and that actually creates that anxiety and that depression. So let's get into mental cognition and clarity. So the Western, SAD, what is it called? The standard American diet, right? The Western diet and the brain and the memory, like what are the effects? And again, this Western diet is high fat, high processed foods, high added sugars and fructose and the aspartame we just talked about. So how does that Western style of, which a lot of us in America eat that way, how does it affect our brain and our memory?
So the memory becomes essentially disrupted. And one of the things that I want people to rethink about cognition and memory is we think about this as a condition of our parents, our grandparents, our older family members, our older friends. It's not. It's a condition for everyone. And here's why. Diet, like I said, is the one factor across many, many different conditions that we have the ability to change. It's the power at the end of your fork. And in cognitive disorders, very often we see someone losing their memory or having early Alzheimer's, and doctors jump in and they try to find medication or they try to find a form of treatment for them. Those it's actually too late at that point. I mean, they should treat the patient and they should assess what's needed. And I'm not saying there's no hope, but I am saying we should be starting sooner. All of us on this conversation today should be thinking about that because in the brain, there might be mild early changes, which are kind of hanging out in the brain. Nothing's happening. But if you continue to eat the fast foods, all of those negative foods, the standard American diet continuously, those changes could evolve into those cognitive changes. And we have the ability, we don't yet have a cure for Alzheimer's, but we can reverse neuroinflammation. And we can do that through our diet. And I have an easy way for us to try to remember it. It's an acronym called BOGOS. So it's B for berries and the color of the rainbow. Berries are my favorite. O for olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. G for eat your leafy greens. Everyone rolls their eyes when I talk about leafy greens, but they're rich in folate and so many nutrients that we need. O is for your omegas, so omega-3 fatty acids. And S is for spices. So turmeric with a pinch of black pepper, significant amount of evidence in anxiety. And then I throw in a C for extra dark chocolate. Since Valentine's Day is coming up, I throw that in as a bonus. Extra dark natural chocolate is rich in cacao flavonol, serotonin, magnesium. It's great for your brain. So a little piece, my clients who are coming off the candy bar and trying to find something that will kind of help their sweet tooth, have learned to eat extra dark natural chocolate, and they only want a square because they're satiated by that, and they no longer need the whole candy bar.
Yeah, a lot of that comes back to one of our previous episodes, Will, breaking up with sugar with Molly Carmel, and how sugar, how you get addicted to it, but you also get numbed to the effects of it over time. Our dopamine receptors are numbed. So that affects our lives, but it also affects how much we need to eat in order to experience that same sense of joy or fulfillment that we were getting before. I'd love to talk just based on time. I know we're going to have to jump through some of our notes here, Will. The micronutrients. So, zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D. One, what role do they play? Two is, when are we deficient, or are we getting an adequate amount? And then three, what are the best natural sources of these?
So all of these are available in foods that we eat. Avocado, off the top of my head, has a lot of magnesium, is rich in the right types of fats. Vitamin C is actually found some of the highest levels in kiwi fruit and red bell peppers, along with citrus fruit, but believe it or not, those two are easy to add in. A lot of these are actually involved in several biochemical reactions in the body, and that's where they really are impactful in mental well-being. Low levels of magnesium are often associated with anxiety. And some people will actually some doctors will add in a magnesium supplement to help people with anxiety, because it's sometimes a very easy fix, but you can also get that through diet. It's just that if someone is super anxious at that time, maybe a supplement helps them, and then they can, as they build up from their dietary needs as well. Vitamin C is not only critical for immunity, it is something that our bodies, our cells need all the time. So I think one of the ways to think about this is by eating healthy whole foods, you almost cannot count the number of micro and macronutrients that you're getting from that healthy plate of food. And it's almost an orchestra. All of those nutrients are getting into your body. They're helping your brain. They're helping your gut. They're helping the microbes. They're undergoing. So magnesium is, for example, involved in about 300 biochemical reactions in the body. So we need it. And they're sort of functioning in concert with one another. And if you're deficient, these are the times that if you're feeling unwell in some way, tell your doctor these symptoms, because he or she can run a blood panel. The electrolytes can very easily be checked to see how you're doing. Same things with vitamin D in the Northeast where I live. Many people, because of the level of sunlight, can be deficient in vitamin D, and it's an easy fix. Vitamin D, you get 80% of your vitamin D from 10 minutes of outdoor time. but sometimes you need to supplement it because you may not be getting enough of it. And vitamin D, low levels of vitamin D associated with both depression and anxiety. So these are, if it's anything I want you all to take away, these are easy fixes. These don't require a visit to the doctor. It could just be adjusting how you're looking at your dinner plate.
And what you're putting on it, right? For sure.
Right.
I was one thing that omega-3 fatty acids in almost every chapter, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, it's not a superfood because it's in different foods, but why are they so important to our diet? And then, how do we kind of bring them into our diet? Like I'm taking chia seeds, like that's my source right now. Yeah. Just like you said, 2 tablespoons in the morning, a little water, and I drink it back, and I'm like, hey, so why omega-3 fatty acids? Like, what is it doing for our mood, but also what is it doing for us physically as well?
Omega-3 fatty acids have a good association with helping mood and lowering anxiety in human subjects. So this is important to include in our diets. So they have an anti-inflammatory property. They work in the brain. They affect the cell membranes of neurons, and so they really are so important in terms of our everyday functioning. And you can get omega-3s pretty easily. You get them in fatty fish if you consume seafood, wild caught salmon, sardines, anchovies, to name a few. And that always, I always like to say at this point, if salmon is sort of an expensive, not in your budget, you can have a good source of wild caught sardines. You can actually get canned wild salmon. These are good choices because they still have those omega-3 fatty acids. The plant-based sources do have the short-chain omega-3s, which is ALA, and they are found in chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, sea vegetables. If you don't eat any seafood and you're concerned about not getting enough omega-3s and you don't want to take an omega-3 supplement, you can take an algal oil supplement. So that's an option too. But these are, if you eat seafood and you have chia seeds and things like that, you can certainly continue to include them in your diet. Chia is also very rich in fiber and protein. So it's a really good food.
Yeah, it's an easy one, very easy one. Now, how does omega affect because you talk about omega-3 and introducing more omega-3s into your diet if you're suffering from like anxiety disorders, like why, like how is that, like here we are again, gut and brain, eating food, right? And then we're affecting our us mentally. So how does that work?
So they have an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effect, and so some of the processes by which our anxiety is driven is because of oxidative stress and neuroinflammation. Those are some of the underlying mechanisms that we know is driving these processes. And these types of foods actually almost combat that. So they're kind of taking care of what's causing those conditions through the mechanisms in the brain. And so we sort of want to think about adding them to our diet in a steady and consistent way so that they build up over time. Our body, but also our brain is receiving them consistently. The microbes are interacting with them in an ongoing way.
And this is something, omega-3, you should have a certain amount every day in your diet. Is that like, is that how, or just at least a few times a week, or, like what is the best medicine in this case?
Right. So, often people will say, well, have a few servings of seafood during the week. I think that, there's no harm in including these on a regular basis. And having them, like you said, you have chia seeds every day. So I think that just continuing to do that becomes important.
All right, thank you.
So, Dr. Naidoo, we've covered a lot in this, but I know your book covers way more than what we've touched on. We've literally just touched on the surface. For someone who is hearing this information for the first time, or has been on maybe a Western diet for most of their lives and wants to experience the benefits of a healthy lifestyle, where should they start? I mean, I know buy the book, read the book is probably the first place to start, but what's the easiest thing that they could do today to really start on this path?
I like to ask people what's bothering them the most about some food habit they've either picked up during the pandemic or that they may be struggling with in the past month. Maybe you're noticing that you're eating ice cream every night. Maybe you're noticing that you have to reach out for a cookie every afternoon, or you're having one too many glass of wine, or one too many cups of coffee. It could be any one of those. The reason I ask a person to start there is because that means it's in their consciousness. They've thought about it, they've wondered, but they're not quite sure how to switch that. I have them start there and see how they can walk themselves back from that habit. Can they have one less cup of coffee, one less glass of red wine? Can they switch out the cookies for a healthier snack, a chia pudding, for example, 2 ingredients, chia and coconut milk, and you sweeten with some cinnamon and vanilla. So these are or berries and nuts. So there's a way to switch out the unhealthy food with something healthy. But the other thing that I say is you can do something as simple as, whether you cook or you don't cook, get a good organic source of powdered turmeric, add a pinch of black pepper, add a 1/4 teaspoon or 1/2 teaspoon to soup, a smoothie, or a tea. If you cook, add it to roasted vegetables that you're making. That is one healthy habit you can start right now. It's easy, and you don't have to do too much other than get a good source of your turmeric. And the pinch of black pepper activates the curcumin in turmeric to make it much more bioactive for your brain. So it's just an easy hack that you should be doing if you have turmeric.
If you are cooking, you talk a lot about different spices. I really enjoyed reading about like spicy foods, how that helps you.
Yeah.
You just talked about turmeric and curcumin, which is within turmeric, and
Within
adding
the
black
turmeric.
pepper because it helps to absorb. And also saffron.
Yes.
So why even adding spices, and how does it bring out more of this wonderful like kind of phytonutrients that helps us with our gut health and our clarity in our mind and our shifting our mood and stuff?
So the one I like to mention is capsaicin from chili peppers, because any kind of spicy food that you eat will have cayenne pepper or some kind of chili pepper, and they contain capsaicin. Capsaicin impacts our glucose metabolism, and it interacts with our hunger hormones. So it actually helps to remind you that you're satiated when you're eating a meal. And so, and it helps with glucose metabolism. So it's just a good thing to kind of know about. And then there's so many other spices you can add. Rosemary, saffron is associated with improved symptoms of depression. I talk a little bit in the book about times when a supplement is appropriate, and that might be one of them, because you can't really get enough saffron from the food you eat. You use very little of it. Rosemary, thyme, parsley, Mexican oregano.
Sage.
There's a whole slew of them. Sage, yeah. So.
Yeah. Wow. And you have a lot. I mean, the book isn't just all the science. I just want everyone to be clear out there. It isn't just like all these meta-analyses and how and this gut and the microbiome and our. But Dr. Naidoo is a professional chef, so she has a lot of recipes in here. So if you want to get into more of the Mediterranean eating pattern and get into this healthier lifestyle, and have more of that. Better mood and better clarity in the brain. You have a ton of recipes in here that I'm excited to take on, because I'm always looking for new healthy food and delicious food, really. And that's the thing. It's like, it's not just you're eating bland, crap or whatever. It's like delicious, really, really delicious food. And I think it's also
to eat cardboard.
Yeah, we do. Exactly. And it's like, and I think it's part of that Western diet. It kind of hijacks our palate in some ways. So we're used to those super like bliss point in food and lots of saturated fats and sugar.
Hyperpalatable.
Yeah. And it might take a little bit of time to come down. And I know we got to go in a little bit. I know it might take a little time to come down to what a natural palate is, meaning the taste of your food, and starting to eat this way slowly and integrating these foods slowly into your diet that aren't blown out by fats and sugars. You'll get into your natural way of eating and tasting food and what actual food tastes like, So
that's a good point.
You,
It's like the chocolate example, candy bar to natural raw natural dark chocolate, you need much less. And people actually will talk about how they taste foods differently when they adjust their palate, their diet.
Well, Dr. Naidoo, thank you so much for being with us today. For people who haven't gotten a chance to get the book, check it out. This is Your Brain on Food by Dr. Uma Naidoo. And she's also got a great presence on Instagram. I follow her. She puts out fantastic recipes, fantastic. And I saw the red pepper vitamin C post yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And I was blown away. I didn't think the red pepper had so much vitamin C in it, but it's pretty powerful. Yeah. So what other ways can people find you if they had questions or anything that they needed to find out from you?
Well, thank you. So I'm on Instagram at DRUMANAIDOO. I also have a website. So subscribe to my newsletter because I send you updates every week on what I'm doing, the new research, things that you can do, tips, and that's umanaidoomd.com. And when you go to my website, I'm also running a course, which is the first course in nutritional psychiatry that's virtual that I've put out. It walks you through a deeper dive of the book. So cool. We're always available to help you with that as well.
Fantastic. We'll make sure that's shared in the show notes. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Naidoo. I'm going to wrap it up with a closing practice very quickly, and then we'll be sure to let you go here at the half hour. So
thank you both so much.
Yeah,
you're
pleasure.
Welcome, Dr. We really appreciate you for putting this work out there in the world. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.
So if you would love to join us for the closing practice, we'd love to have you. But if you have to go, we also understand that, Dr. Naidoo. So if you're comfortable, or rather get into a comfortable position, whatever that may look like for you. And based on today's conversation, we're just going to do a quick gratitude practice and bring our thoughts, our attention to our bodies and the gifts that they are, our bodies, our minds, and our nervous systems, this miracle that we are a part of. And just think for a moment on that. Think for a moment on the miracle you are and how grateful we can be for the miracle that we are in this time, in this space, right here, right now. And as you move about your day, throughout your day, continue to think on that. Continue to just take pauses and give thanks for the miracle that you are, and continue to feed that miracle, literally and physically. Feed it well so that it can be the best version of itself, so that you can be the best version of yourself. And let's wrap it up with one deep cleansing breath together. Begin by breathing out all your air. Breathe in nice and deep. Hold at the top and relax. As you breathe out, just think grateful, thankful, gratitude. And thank you, Dr. Naidoo. Thank you so much again for being with us today. I am grateful for you and what you've put out into the world. And thank you for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, you both. Thanks, Will. Thanks, John. Take good care.
Thank you, Dr. Naidoo. Really appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, everyone. Until next time. Peace.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.